Hi there, GMC owners. Today in your 2021 GMC Canyon, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Demco's Air Force One supplemental braking system. And this is what our braking system looks like when it's installed. This is a permanently mounted braking system that will stay on your vehicle whether or not you're flat towing or you're driving it around town. This system operates off of the air pressure from the air brakes on your motorhome, so when you're driving around town not hooked up, it will never be able to activate for you. So it's a nice safe system, and it is a truly proportional system because the harder you hit your brakes in the motorhome, the more pressure it's going to send back to this system and apply the brakes here harder. So that way you get, again, a truly proportional system. This is probably the best braking system you can get if you have air brakes on your motorhome. The cylinder that's located here on the pedal is attached to the pedal, clamped around it, and then there's an anchor back on the firewall. So once the system is activated, it charges the cylinder, pulling the pedal towards the firewall, activating the brakes. There's a monitor light included with the system that will give you real-time feedback of when the system is activating. Let's go ahead and head into the motorhome, where we'll look at the wireless version that we've got installed today, and we'll see that when we hit the brake, the monitor light illuminates, letting us know that the brake has moved. And we're now here in the motorhome. We've got our wireless receiver here that's plugged into the auxiliary outlet. It's powered up. I'm gonna just hit the brake. And you can see here we get our real-time feedback that the brakes are applied. If you continue to hold the brakes for a certain amount of time, it'll give you an audible feedback there. You can turn that on and off. This is useful for, let's say an example, you let off your brake and this stays lit up. Maybe you're not paying attention, you don't see it. You get that audible beep, so that way you'll know, hey, something's still applied in the back, but I'm not pressing the brake in my motorhome. Kind of gives you some information so you can go stop, pull over, and figure out what's going on. But again, I do realize in heavy traffic where you're going to be on the brakes a lot, you might just want to switch that off because you know that you're pressing the brake and that's why it's activating. But yeah, now we'll be taking a look at the system here. Why don't you follow along with me and we'll show you how to get it installed. We'll begin our installation here underneath the hood. We're going to get all of our main components mounted up, and I like to start with the operating unit here first. This is the big old box that comes in your kit. This is where kind of all the magic happens. Your inputs, your outputs, everything kind of goes through this. To mount this up, usually I just mount it right to the top of the fuse box cover. It worked out fine on this one as well. You can see it's got some holes on each side with the little flanges there. I just kind of set the unit on top and then drilled some holes in the side with a 1/4-inch bit, and then use cable ties to secure it on each side. Then I just put a little bit of silicone over the holes that I had drilled to seal it back up. Then we mounted our breakaway switch, and we mounted it right here. We did cut a little notch out. I just held my switch up here so I can mark it on each side. I actually made my marks on the back side because there's a factory bolt that's located right there that we can use to mount our switch to. Here you can see the factory bolt that we removed and ran through our breakaway switch with our wiring there. Next is our connector that we'll need to mount at the front, and there are two connectors you get in your kit. You get a male and a female. The male one here is our vehicle side. The female is going to go over on the motorhome. For this one, it does come installed on a bracket, but the bracket, there's really no good place to mount it up here. Everything's plastic on this thing up here at the front, and it really wouldn't be that secure mounting it with a couple of screws into plastic and with that 90-degree bracket. Every time you push on it, you're going to be flexing that plastic. So instead, we just mounted it directly into the plastic here. This way, we're not going to be getting a mechanical advantage from the bracket wearing out the hardware that's holding it in place. Instead, we just simply remove the connector from the bracket that it's installed in. We used a 9/16 wrench here for the larger side and a 7/16 on the smaller side on the other side, and just unscrewed the two pieces. And then I used a 3/8 drill bit, a 5/16 drill bit to drill out the hole here, and then I just pushed my components through the hole and secured them back together. I did add a flat washer to each side just to make sure that it can't pull through, give us a little bit more surface area, and just snugged them down with those same wrenches that I used to take it apart. Next, we're inside the vehicle on the driver's side here on our brake pedal. We need to mount the cylinder that comes in the kit right on the arm. The metal bracket that you see here comes pre-attached to the cylinder, so just remove the nuts that's on there. You can slide the bracket off, slide your bolts over your pedal and then slide the bracket back into place and then secure it with the nuts. You use a 3/8 socket to tighten these down, and when I tighten these down, I don't use a ratchet or any tool, just the socket in my hand to tighten it down. Because if you over tighten this and bend the bracket, it's not going to clamp properly. You just need it to be squeezed on there decently, and if you tighten it by hand with the socket, you should have no problem getting it to clamp. You can see it's not going anywhere, and we didn't over tighten it to damage our bracket here. Coming out of the back of the cylinder, you'll see here there's a cable. The cable needs to be tethered to the firewall, so we cut out some of the insulation that was here and used the screw that came provided in the kit, self-tapping screw, to run it into place. The cable will then need to be adjusted to the appropriate length. If you have adjustable pedals, we don't in this case, but if you do, you'll want to extend those as close to the seat as possible, so bring them all the way as close to the driver. We do not want them as close to the firewall, we want the opposite of that, close to the driver's seat. And then measure out your length here. It pushes through the anchor like you see here. It goes in, twists around, goes back in again to wrap around it. And then you'll tighten down the set screw located on top with a number 4 Allen key. And when you tighten this down, you want to make sure you don't over tighten it. I found that if you tighten it until it's flush with the top of the anchor, that usually gives you the appropriate amount of tightness that's not going to be too tight to damage the cable. We also want to make sure you're not pushing any pressure on the pedal. The pedal needs to be free, so you should have just a little bit of play here. Now that we've got our cylinder mounted up, we can go ahead and start wiring up the monitor light system here. So if you look at the cylinder here, there's a switch on it here. This is the reed switch. There's a wire that comes off of it, and off of this wire there are 2 ends. You'll have a purple, which to me looks more like a brown color, but they say purple in the instructions, and a blue wire. The purple wire we need to get a power source from, so we actually route a cable through, or a wire through the grommet located right over there for your for the hood release. Here's the hood release right here, the lever. If you follow this cable back, you'll see there's a grommet over there on the edge that will poke through the firewall. We take the brown wire that's included in the kit and we just poke it right through the same grommet. I just use a little screwdriver to poke through there, and then I was able to poke the wire through. So here we have the reed switch wires. I have them just bundled up over here, kind of hide them behind the pedal, the parking brake pedal. So this black wire that you see here is the reed switch. Coming out of it, you have 2 really small wires. There's a blue and then there's a violet. To me, it looks like a more brownish color. But that is your power wire. So our brown wire here that comes in our kit, you just get some excess brown wire. We're gonna hook that to this brown wire, and then we need to feed it outside. To get it outside, there's a grommet located here. You may or may not be able to see it. It's really tucked up behind the parking brake pedal here, but if you just follow the hood release cable here and just follow that back, that goes directly to the grommet. To help you assist you to get it through the firewall, I would also recommend taking the Airline hose that comes in your kit and feeding that through the same grommet, that black Airline hose that comes in your kit, because that actually is easier to feed through, and then you can tape your wire through it to pull the wire through it, because the Airline hose is easier to route than the wire is. So that way you also have both of those hoses, the hose and the wire, routed through the grommet. So now we'll continue just hooking them up here, because that'll hook to the battery outside. We'll get out there in a minute. So the other wire on our reed switch here is a blue wire. This is going to hook to the positive side of your indicator light. We're using the wireless version, so that actually has a little wireless box that we've mounted right here, but there is just a regular lighted version as well. So the blue wire for the reed switch would hook to the red wire from either the wireless box or from the LED light, whichever version of the kit that you purchased. On your LED light and also on your box, you're also going to have another circuit on there. I believe on the LED light it's a black wire. On our wireless one here, it's a white wire. This just needs to connect to ground. We've connected it to a ground wire further back. We actually connected it to our battery negative just because of the way the customer's got some accessories wired, but normally you could hook it to ground anywhere, just right on the frame to get that. So once you've got all these wires down here hooked up, you've routed your hose through. The one end of your hose that's here inside the vehicle still, you can go ahead and hook that to your cylinder. That just pokes right into the quick connect fitting that's located here. Just push it right into that. And then you can pull the slack out. I do like to leave just a little bit of slack that's here for this cable, just so that way you have free movement of your pedal travel, but for the most part, the majority of the slack is removed, and we pull it through the other side. We're now outside the vehicle, and what we're looking at here is the other side of that grommet that we were just discussing. We're just to the right of the brake fluid reservoir, and there's a little pocket here that we're looking down, and that's exactly where you're going to see that grommet. So our Airline hose right here routes up. The brown wire that we routed in also routes up. And then if you're hooking your ground side directly to the battery like we did, you'll want to route that up here to the battery as well. But again, you can normally route this to the frame. The only reason we had to route it directly to the battery is because our customer's got this negative side disconnect switch, which I do not recommend. We sell positive side disconnect switches here at eTrailer, and that is the correct way to do it. With a ground side switch, you're removing ground to the entirety of the frame and stuff, so you can get it can really make your flat toe installation a lot more difficult doing it this way. So the positive side would be the recommended way to do it. But anyway, we'll move on and finish connecting everything up. So the Airline hose here that routed out of our grommet, it's just going to route over here towards our main unit, and go ahead and snip off the excess. You do want to make sure you're using hose cutters to make sure you get a clean cut. You can get some here at eTrailer if you need some. And it just pokes right into that air out. It's labeled right here on top. We got our Airline connected now, so let's go ahead and get to our brown wire. That just continues routing down the side of our box here. We route it down the side because it needs to connect to a power source here. So here you can see our brown wire is connected to the fuse harness that comes in our kit. We are using heat shrink butt connectors out here. Inside the vehicle, we use the connectors that came included with our kit, but out here where it's exposed to the elements, I wouldn't recommend using any of the connectors that come in your kit. Get some heat shrink ones. You can get those here at eTrailer to seal everything up. Now you also notice here that we've got another wire that's connected to our fuse harness that comes in our kit. This orange wire here is going down to the breakaway switch that we mounted. We just kind of routed the wires straight up here. They just kind of route over, and then we go up next to the radiator and everything. It just kind of comes right up here. We use some of the Airline that comes in our kit to help us route it. So that is what the orange wire is. It's an orange wire from our breakaway switch. That'll connect to our fuse harness on the other side, and this will just connect to our battery positive. You can get to that by lifting up on the cover here. The fuse harness, when you get it, is going to be a loop, so just cut the red wire so that way the loop is open. You'll strip back each side. One's going to get that butt connector to get your power wires connected up, and the other is going to get a ring terminal that you can connect to your battery here. This nut can be removed with a 13mm socket, slide your ring terminal on, and then just reinstall it. We can now put our cover back in. At this time, I recommend that you do not install your fuse yet into your fuse harness. It's fine to have it hooked up, but leave that fuse out until you're all done so there's no chances of any shorts occurring. You can go ahead and reinstall that. So now that we're right here, we can go ahead and start hooking up some of the components in the front. So if we see our air in here, that's located on our box. We're going to poke in Airline that comes in our kit, just the remaining that we've got now, poke that into there. And this just kind of loops around. I looped it around like this so that way there's enough slack in our lines and wiring here so the customer can still open his fuse box cover. So make sure you're leaving enough slack in your lines and cables so the cover can still come off of there. So it kind of loops around a little bit to have some slack. It runs down the side. You can see it right there. And then here it just goes straight down to where we can get to our switch that we already looked at down below, and it just pokes into that switch. And again, I use this Airline tubing to help me get my wires routed. I poked the Airline down because it's a little bit stiffer, easier to poke down, taped my breakaway switch wires to it, and pulled those back up. Now your breakaway switch does have another wire on it. It has a black wire that you see here. This black wire is the output of the breakaway switch for when the pin gets pulled. This needs to connect to our box, so it just routes right back up here. Our box has two black wires coming out of it. You see there's both the black wires. It doesn't matter which one of these you hook to. Either these two wires here can be swapped with one another as long as you both have them just hooked up at all. So one of them, just grab one of them, and I just route it down the side, and that connects to the black wire from our breakaway switch. And you can see that there. We used another heat shrink butt connector to make those connections. The other black wire that's located over here just needs to connect to ground, and we routed that directly to the battery negative post because of this setup he's got here, but it's not a bad idea to use the negative for that anyway. But again, you could use a ground on the frame or something like that if you're not using a setup like this. At this point now, we've got all of our Airline, all of our wiring and all that hooked up. We just need to hook into the vacuum brake booster for our system. So that way we're getting power assist from our vehicle. So the vacuum line here, you're gonna get some that comes in your kit. You're gonna get quite a bit of it. Cut a small portion of it, poke in one of the check valves that comes in your kit, black side towards the unit. Then more of your hose is gonna route down and over to here. This is where we're gonna make our connection into the factory line. What I did is I cut it right here at this connector where it goes into the vacuum pump there. I just cut the line right there. I did have to use the adapters that come in our kit. So you have to source your own thicker diameter line to slide over the adapter and slide over your factory line. We crimped it onto the factory line. From the adapter that comes in our kit, we use the line that comes in our kit that fits onto that adapter. Another check valve is in place with the black side towards the connector over there. Another small piece of the line that comes in our kit goes to our T fitting. The T right here is more of the line that comes in our kit. It goes into an adapter, into the larger diameter hose, and then right back onto our factory line right there, and we crimp it onto there. This other side of our T here is that line that's just running over to our unit. So now we're underneath our motorhome. We need to mount up the tank that comes in our kit, and where we're at right now, we're underneath the motorhome just in front of the rear axle. And here's the relay valve right here. Oftentimes this relay valve, the bracket that it's mounted to, has the same spacing as the tank for its mounts. So we just take the nuts off, slide our tank over the bolts that are already there. I did slide a flat washer on it, and then I just bolted it back down. We used a flat washer in the kit, and just all the other hardware here was just on the motorhome already. And that secures it right up there for us. You got 3 connections on your tank. You've got one here on the right side. This is our supply air. Then we go to the other side of the tank. There's 2 connections over here. This is for your metered air right there. And then the one here that swivels, this one swivels a little bit. This is the output that's going to go to the back of the motorhome for making our connection to our supplemental braking system. To get our supply air, first thing you're going to want to do is drain the air from your system. So you can just press the brake a bunch of times to do that. And once you've done that, then you'll need to identify your hose. Usually it's a 5/8 diameter. It's a very thick green line on this one. You can kind of see it up in there. It's way up there, so it's really difficult to see. I recommend you can disconnect that line then and start your motorhome. If you feel air rushing out of that 5/8 line after you disconnect it, that's your supply air. You've chosen the right one. Go ahead and plug it back in and then cut that line at a point where you can insert your T. You can't really see it because it's so high up, but it's very similar to this T right here. We added this T. This is the metered air that we're looking at right here, but the supply is similar. It's that green hose that's back there. It's just hard to see. It's a larger T than this one. This is a 3/8. That one's 5/8. So it just pokes in, just like this one here. Our lines, the supply line will just poke into each side of the T, and then the little middle portion's got a 1/4-inch line. That's this guy right here. This hose just routes over, it kind of circles around, and it goes up to that green line to plug in there to get our supply air. Next, we're doing our metered air. The metered air you'll often find that goes from the relay block that the supplies air is going to, and then it usually comes down from that relay block and it goes to this relay block. The one where your tank's mounted. That's pretty much the most common. There are other ways that this can be set up, so you are going to have to do your own research for your motorhome to verify you're doing it correctly, but that's just something to look out for. Now, to check to make sure that this is working properly, same thing. Drain all the air out of your system, pump up those brakes. After you've done that, you can come down here and disconnect the line that you're suspecting it to be. It's a 3/8, usually goes from that relay block to this relay block. So you can just disconnect it. They're all quick connect fittings, so you can just pull it out of there. And then have your buddy start your motorhome. Have an assistant start it, let it build up some air pressure, and once it's built up some pressure, have them press the brakes. If air comes out of this line only when they're pressing the brakes, you found the metered air. Good job. Go ahead and cut the line in the middle at some point, and then insert your T in there just like you see there. And then our 1/4-inch line that comes out of our metered air routes over to the connection right here. Lastly, you've got your main line here that goes to the back. This is the output that's going to go to your vehicle. So just poke in the rest of your line that comes into your kit into there and just route it down the frame rail all the way to the back, making sure to avoid any moving objects and anything excessively hot like your exhaust. I always just follow existing wiring that's already in place. That way, because all that wiring that's already there, you already know is routed in a way where it's not going to get damaged. So just follow it down that wiring all the way to the back of the motorhome. We're now back at the very back of our motorhome here, so we can mount up the connector for the motorhome side. This is the female side. It has the release collar on it. This is the bracket that it comes installed in. We kind of talked about on the the vehicle side. We had removed it from the bracket. It's the same bracket, but we're going to use it here on the motorhome side. This fiberglass is actually fairly strong, so it's okay to mount it to it. I just held the bracket up to it where I wanted to mount it. I marked the 2 holes and just drilled through them with a 5/16 bit. Then I used the hardware that comes included with the bracketry here to just secure it in place. It's just a couple of washers, a bolt and a nut, and then I used a 7/16 socket and wrench to tighten that hardware down. Then we just take the Airline that we had routed here to the back and poke that into the quick connect fitting at the back of our connector here. At this point, we're ready to hook up and test everything out. So go ahead and pull your vehicle up behind your motorhome, because you do need to get air pressure before the system will operate. It actually gets pre-charged from your motorhome here. So make sure you start your motorhome, charge the system back up with air, get your vehicle behind it, and we'll grab our cables and plug in. So here's our cable. We're gonna take the female end of the cable, plug it into the male side here on the vehicle, take the male end of the cable, plug it into the female side here on the motorhome. Now you will have to press the brakes in your motorhome to charge it up, but as soon as you hit the brakes in your motorhome, you should see the pedal moving inside. So I'd recommend doing that, verifying that the pedal moves. Once you've done that and pressed the brake at least once, you can then also come out here and pull your breakaway switch pin and also verify that it's working properly. As far as the monitor light, since it was a wireless one, the receiver just goes in your motorhome and you simply plug it into your auxiliary outlet to power that one up, and then you can get real-time feedback that the system's working. And that completes our installation of Demco's Air Force One supplemental braking system on our 2021 GMC Canyon.